Hey everybody, it is Jangle, and today I'm making a video on Solidly and Solidex, some fundamental analysis now that we are in week 2 of the emissions schedule. I updated this spreadsheet with numbers 25 hours after the second week of emissions began. I have data from my veNFT yield performance as well as my vote locked SEX performance. And so let's just jump into it. But before we do, I do want to say that this is a very innovative tokenomic structure. It can be likened to curve and convex. However, it is not curve and convex. It is not nearly as entrenched as those applications, not nearly the same volume. This has only been out for a couple weeks, and curve and convex are some of the largest DeFi protocols on the planet. So it's really not a one-to-one comparison. And Andre Cronje is not here to make you rich. He is here to try some novel tokenomics and see how it plays out. So this is high risk. Taking any directional exposure to Solid or SEX is high risk, and it is a bet on the continued growth and adoption of the Solidly exchange. I do believe that Solidly will be successful on Phantom and then perhaps other networks because I see the tokenomics being sustainable and good enough to attract high levels of TVL while also not inflating away the value of the token. That's essentially the whole point. And I think that it probably will achieve that. But if you don't have confidence in that, then it's going to be a bumpy ride. And we've seen a lot of price volatility in these assets as the market tries to figure out what the hell is going on. So please be careful. Please do your own research. Please, if you're going to get price exposure or exposure to the Solid token or to SEX or to SolidSEX or any, Weave or 0x or OXDAO or whatever, please do research and be careful and recognize that this is an experiment on the cutting edge of DeFi and it may go south, not financial advice and all that. So looking here, the Solid market cap, that is including the locked Solid tokens as well as the circulating supply, everything in folks' wallets, claimable Solid, Solid and liquidity pools, all of that times the price at about $4 and some change here gives us a current market cap of a little bit over 200 million. SEX with a market cap of 12.5 million, SolidSEX with a market cap of about 42 million. Comparing that to Curve and Convex, again, not because these are the same stage of projects. You can't say, well, SEX is $12.5 million market cap, Convex has $1 billion market cap, I'm going to buy SEX and I'm going to be a billionaire. That's not how it works. We'll draw some conclusions as this video goes on, but just know this is not an apples to apples comparison. It's just for your reference. So the fully diluted value of all Solid at maximum emissions of 100 million at these prices puts it an FDV of over 400 million. So looking at evaluating the exchange here, you can see that initially the TVL got almost a $2.5 billion in a very short period of time. We've seen a decrease in the price of Solid due to these massive front-loaded emissions, as you can reference here and we'll talk about in a second. But with that drop in Solid price, as well as a drop off in the number of Solid tokens being emitted from week 1 to week 2, led to drastically lower APRs than were available in week 1. So you've seen the amount of TVL pull back as the incentive to ape into all the LPs on Solidly, and then as well as putting your LP token on Solidex, it dropped off. So that being said, we can see, so just a few hours ago, 0 UTC. So we got another day logged in here. But yesterday the volume was as high as ever. Now the revenue is still very low because I believe all swaps, it might just be stablecoin swaps, but I believe all swaps are 0.01% fee. And it might just be stablecoins. And if so, that would make a lot of sense. But from what I can tell, I'd have to look in the contracts. I couldn't find any other docs for sure. But from what I can tell, it's 0.01% fee, whereas Spooky is a 0.2%. Solidly is a 0.01% fee. So it's not generating a ton of revenue, but it's mainly going for volume. It's mainly going to be the premier exchange. And I think it makes a lot of sense that if you can just have these drastically lower fees and also have a tokenomic structure that incentivizes really deep liquidity, all of the exchanging is going to be happening on your exchange. That just makes a lot of sense. Plus, there are also bribes natively built into Solidly. So this is a big difference between Curve and Solidly, is that on Solidly, you can actually natively vote for assets. And not only do you lock up and get your locked solid, but like you would with Curve, you get VE Curve, but you get an NFT. So that makes it, in the future, potentially collateralizable, but also in the present, it makes it liquid. You can actually trade it using Solidex. You can give them your NFT, and then you can actually convert it into vlSEX, which gives you exit liquidity and gives Solidex more solid. So that's really cool. But anyway, that NFT, VE NFT, allows you to get bribes as well. So right now, looking at the current supply, is a little bit over half of will ever exists currently. So 53 million, 32.3 of those are locked, 20.6 million in circulation, in liquidity pools, in wallets, that sort of thing, leaving us future 47 million emissions. And that here, if you look at on Phantom Scan, the token address, you can see the biggest holders. Number one is a smart contract that's controlling the future emissions. Number two is actually the smart contract that it has all the locked solid, the VE NFTs, and those are those two main holders up there. Currently, 61% of the supply that exists today is already locked up. So you can see almost a third of the solid that will ever exist is already locked up, and we are 8 days into the emissions. So looking at the emission schedule, shout out to Average Joe Crypto for doing these estimates here in this Substack article that he made. I also included the code directly on GitHub for the emission schedule. To do these calculations, Average Joe did make some assumptions. He assumed a 50% average lockup per week by week. So it's impossible to know what these emissions are for sure, but they should look very close to this. Here you can see that it's broken into emissions to LPs and emissions to VE lockers added together. So LPs are going to be getting their solid emissions for their LPs, while VE lockers are going to be getting them on rebases on their VE NFT, and that includes all the VE NFTs that Solidex holds. However, Solidex keeps their emissions. They don't return it to their vlSEX stakers. It actually ends up going to the vlSEX lockers. So a little key difference there. However, you'll see that if you have a VE NFT, you get these emissions that give you proportional circulating supply to when you entered. So if you put in, let's say day one, you put in a whole bunch of solid that was worth 1% of the circulating supply, you will never have less than 1% of the circulating supply. As the total amount of solid grows, anybody who locks it, they don't get diluted. So to avoid dilution, you're incentivized to max lock your solid, as well as you get bribes, you get the future emissions, you get revenue. The bribes I think are going to be really big if solid ends up being a major player long term in the exchanges. So as the supply increases, the VE NFTs increase the solid that they command, and it always stays a fixed percentage of the circulating supply. So what if you don't want to lock up your solid for 4 years? What if you want exit liquidity? What if you're an LP and you just want to get all the boosts and all the benefits and the maximum utility of the solid token without actually having to buy a bunch of solid and lock it up yourself? You're just trying to LP. Well, that's where Solidex comes in. And the purpose of Solidex is, one, to create liquidity for the veNFTs. So if you have that locked up solid in NFT format, you can always go to Solidex, give it to them. They'll give you vlSEX, and you'll be able to withdraw and get some exit liquidity in a phantom pool. As well as it just aligns the incentives of the lockers, the voters, the LPs, and it concentrates all of this voting power on one platform. So no matter who you are, all parties involved are able to get the maximum utility out of all of Solidex's maximum locked solid. So even if you're an LP, if you're a vlSEX voter, etc. So here you'll see that there's about 26 million vlSEX, and so SEX can be locked up for a maximum of 16 weeks, and every week you lock up your SEX for is one vlSEX. So one SEX can command a maximum of 16 vlSEX. So we've got about 10, almost 11 million solid locked on Solidex, which is over a third of the total solid that is locked. So we saw earlier that there's almost, it's about 32.3 million solid locked. Well, almost 11 million of that is Solidex's solid. So that's very significant. You can see that there's about a current supply of 2.3 million SEX. So all of these 2.3 million SEX, that's all of the SEX that controls all of this solid. However, only 1.8 million of it are actually locked. So there's 545,000 SEX that are just floating around in LPs or in people's wallets, not locked for whatever reason. So that means that this 1.8 million SEX control almost 11 million solid. They get the rebases for all this solid. They get not only that, they get the trading fees and bribes that all this solid earns. They get the VE solid expansions, the rebases, the votes, the LP fees. They get 5% of all solid farmed on the protocol by the LPs also goes to these SEX lockers, and token whitelisting fees, which I assume, I honestly don't even know what they mean by that. But yeah, maybe it's creating new pools or creating a pool on Solid. There's Solidex. There's a fee for that, and that goes to vote lock SEX holders. So doing some quick math here, the average the average solid controlled by the average SEX locker is 6. So the solid per vlSEX is about 0.419. And then the solid per SEX, if you max lock it, so some of these lockers aren't in for the max period of time. If you max lock and get 16 vlSEX per SEX, you're getting command over 6.71 solid per maximum vote locked SEX, which is crazy. It's very, very significant considering that right now SEX is trading for about $7 and Solid is trading for about $4. So that's pretty wild. That's pretty crazy indeed. So you're getting this is essentially a leveraged Solid exposure almost. But let's look at the performance, because like I said earlier, I have a veNFT that is 181 solid. I locked week 1. Rough, again, these numbers will change very quickly. They've changed just while I'm recording this video, but assuming $4.03. This was worth more when I locked it up. However, just going to work with the current numbers. So a $730 position of 181 solid, and a $1,000 position of 143 SEX at an average price of 709. How did these fare over 25 hours? So these rewards were over 25 hours. I've done some calculations here to extrapolate the weekly APR and the yearly APR. Again, APR, not APY. And with these dollar values, and this isn't even all my rewards here. So you'll see for my veNFT, this is only the tomb rewards I've calculated here. I'm going to get some other wrap phantom rewards, some solid, some spirit. It's going to depend, especially the solid's going to depend on the volume of the pool. The other rewards are not going to be a lot. The primary bribe here was the tomb. And as well as right here, the SolidSEX rewards. You'll see this image down here on the spreadsheet that in a link to the contract address, because for a while, the last day or so, the UI on Solidex was not working. You weren't able to see what your APRs were. You weren't able to see what the yield was, how much SolidSEX you'd gotten, or what your APR was. So I actually had to go to the contract itself, query my address with the token reward, the token address, and get it directly on PhantomScan. I have the link to do that. However, while I was recording this video just a moment ago, they were able to update this. So as you'll see, in the last hour or so, I've gained another SolidSEX here, but they're actually calculating this this dollar value wrong, unless I'm missing something. And I think this APR might be based on this dollar value as well. So I still think by roughly 1,700, and then maybe this is a little bit underreported because I'm not including any bribes that you'll see here. But the primary reward here is SolidSEX, and 14 SolidSEX is not $120 right now. SolidSEX is about $4. So let's just say 14 times 4, it's roughly $56. So since this is more accurate, I did the calculations closer here than what the UI is able to do. So we're looking at a weekly APR of about 32%. With the values that we have now, unless there's something I'm missing here, I don't know why this USD value here is miscalculated, but you'll see that this has been a couple hours, and when I queried this, it was 12.26. Now it's 14. So this is accurate. This is fairly accurate. But yes, you'll see here that because each SEX is commanding tons of solid, and it's getting performance or provider fees from the LPs, and it's getting those VE solid rebases, that right now, considering it is trading very close to, less than 2x the price of solid, it seems to be a much better deal. It seems to be a much better deal at these prices to me, to get SEX directly and lock it up for 16 weeks. And yes, there's going to be a lot of volatility in the price. And I think the main risk is honestly that look at how quickly these emissions drop. They really drop off a cliff. So, my main concern is that the emissions drop off a cliff, and the solid token, doesn't have that demand for it. And then the APRs go down, LPs leave. And when the LPs leave, the exchange becomes bad because it doesn't have deep liquidity, and then it fails. That's the risk I see here. However, I see a strong incentive from a investor standpoint to buy SEX and solid and lock it up, because it's going to give you bribes if the platform is successful. If Solidly is successful, then folks will bribe these pools. These pools will generate revenue, and these will be cash flowing tokens. There a lot of the cash flow right now is from obviously just from bribes. But besides those bribes, a lot of emissions. So we'll see what happens when the emissions drop off. There is a chance that the solid token, and by extension the SEX token, because of the dropping off of emissions and the locking up of liquidity, go up in price over the time horizon of weeks or months. And if that happens, then the APRs will be able to stay high because the price of solid goes up. And if the price of solid goes up, the weekly emissions can go down and the APRs can stay high. Right now, we're in the beginning of the second week. You can see we're just spewing emissions like crazy. So even if you don't want any exposure, you can always go over to Solidex. You can stable farm. You can farm Phantom Tomb at 100%. That's no impermanent loss. Get 7% of your Bitcoin. You got Boo. If you've got Frax, if you've got some SYN, some USDC SYN, so you can get in these pools and you can get a high yield and you can get some exposure to Solid and SEX without, as a moon bag here, right? Because if this doesn't work and Solid is not a popular exchange, then Solid and SEX are going to zero, But if this does work, and more people lock these up, and therefore the prices appreciate and the emissions drop off a cliff and the prices go higher, and that keeps the APRs high. If in 2 months from now, or even a month and a half from now, we are seeing the price of Solid increase to support high APRs despite these lowering emissions, then this could be quite the moon bag. This could be really quite the moon bag. So I'm not betting the farm on it. Right now, I'm looking at, I'm in a SolidSEX Phantom pool that's high 3 digits. I'm in that Phantom pool. I'm farming it. I've got my vlSEX. I'm going to continue to monitor this veNFT position. Going to continue to monitor this vlSEX position. I'm probably going to roll some SolidSEX into more SEX and lock it up some more, since it really seems like SEX is trading at a large discount. But remember, Solidex is unaudited. It is having issues. I mean, it is real time having issues, and there are competitors on the horizon with OXDAO and VE, Weave, and I haven't even touched on those in this video. So be careful. Maybe just stable farm or farm with assets you already have, because if you get your hands on some Solid and some SEX, and this ends up working out, as you can see, it's going to become very deflationary, or the emissions are going to drop off a cliff. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to share this sheet. However, I did import a lot of it from Excel, so some of it's hard-coded. Sorry, the formulas didn't all transfer over. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments and you'd like to bounce some ideas off me. I'd love to hear it. I'll include this so that you can make a copy of it. This all is going to change very quickly. And hopefully this video helps. Take care.